Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's Thursday, February 1st. Had a nice rebound in the market today. Actually, yesterday I wanted to do a video and then I got caught up with some things that I had to take care of and I just didn't have time. But I was going to say in the video that yesterday's, kind of manic, crazy, monetarist, zombie-driven sell-off in reaction to Powell's comments, I said that was going to be reversed today. And one of the reasons was today is the first of the month, so we're getting the big first of the month fiscal flows. Okay, this is a big fiscal flow day. Tomorrow is a Social Security payments day, so we got 2 days in a row of very significant leading spending flows. So that's bullish. But I want to talk a little bit about, if you guys haven't seen by now, if you haven't realized by now, that every time these monetarist zombies do something, that if you simply do the opposite of what they do, that in itself is a very good trading strategy, okay? Yesterday was another classic example of this where, leading up to the Fed meeting, as is always the case, and this is why I've said in the past, I don't pay attention to these Fed meetings because they're really irrelevant. I understand the impact of monetary policy, and the monetarist people, those zombies, they really don't have an understanding of monetary policy. They have kind of like a mythical understanding. They have kind of like a dogmatic understanding. It's an opinion, but it's not an opinion based in reality. It's a belief system which is not true in actuality. So given that, it is often the right move to go against them. But anyway, yesterday, and I thought, by the way, I even said this in the previous, here's my doggy friends barking, if you could hear it in the background. Of course, they're always out there accompanying me on these videos. And these are always these little yappy dogs, which I hate these little yappy dogs. I said the other day in a video, I thought that the Fed would lean more towards a dovish outlook when it comes to, future monetary policy because, it's an election year, and Biden is Powell's boss, okay? And here comes the helicopters too. So we got everything going on here today, folks. We got the dogs. We got the helicopters. We got everything going on here today. But anyway, I was wrong about that. It looked like in Powell's comments that he came out with more or less a hawkish tone. At least that's how the media and the pundits described it. Again, I don't pay attention to it. I let the whole thing happen. I see what policy is. If there's a change in policy, I understand that, what the impact is going to be, and then if I need to adjust my strategy, I adjust my strategy. I don't sit there frozen in front of the screen at 1:59 p.m. waiting for that statement to come out. It's just, to me, that's nonsense. It's idiotic. I just don't do that, okay? But anyway, so supposedly whatever Powell said, and again, I don't watch the TV, I don't listen to the news conferences, I just don't engage in that. But whatever he said was supposedly construed as a hawkish stance, and they trashed the market, they sold it way down, and I said, or I was going to say in a video, but I did send this out to my subscribers yesterday. I said, look, tomorrow, meaning today, is the first of the month payments day. We're going to get a leading flow of, it could be as much as 120 billion. Friday is going to be a Social Security payments day. So these 2 days, today and tomorrow, it's like a tsunami flood of money coming into the economy from fiscal transfers, okay? So I said it was going to be reversed. And sure enough, today it was reversed. And it probably would have been reversed even without first of the month payments day, because these are just reflex reactions by people who are really, really ignorant. And again, like I said earlier, they're just operating on a belief system which is completely erroneous and lacks understanding of what it is they think they know. They're just wrong constantly. And the funny thing is we've gone through what? We're coming up on 2 years now where we've been in this rising interest rate cycle, and high rates kind of plateaued here and stuck here, and we've seen the stock market go to all-time record highs. We've seen the economy grow at above a 3% GDP growth rate, which is very decent GDP growth rate, and yet they still have it in their minds that, well, if the Fed doesn't cut rates, then there's going to be a recession, there's going to be a market crash, we're going to have all these problems. And I mean, there you have in front of you this abundance of evidence that it is completely opposite from what they are saying. My little doggy friends out there again. So, and I've said this a million times, it's fascinating. I mean, just to watch, I sit there and I watch this in amazement, because, like I said, it's just right out there in front of their noses that everything that they talk about and all of their forecasts end up completely opposite to what they think the outcome is going to be. And there's never any question about why they were wrong. They just keep doubling down and tripling down on the same outlook. So anyway, I wanted to touch on that, the monetarist zombies. If you do nothing else, and I'm not saying it'll work out all the time, but pretty much most of the time, if you go again, because I've said this just in a general way, not even as it applies to trading or investing. If you go again in life, if you go against stupidity, if you go against ignorance, if you go against dogma, blindness, let's call it blindness, not actual blindness, but blindness in like closing yourself off or shutting your eyes to the truth. If you operate against that kind of a position or that kind of a behavior, you have to come out as a winner in the long term. You have to. It's just mathematical. Folks, it's mathematical. All right, let me move on here a second, and I want to talk about, so leading fiscal flows, we'll call it top line government spending, is very strong. Okay, I mentioned that the other day. It's like 107 billion over last year so far in this fiscal year. And last year we did 7 trillion. The government did 7 trillion. So we're 107 billion above that. The problem is the net flow. In other words, after taxes are taken, the net flow is actually down year over year. Okay, so what's happening is that, again, using the swimming pool analogy, compared to last year, I'm talking about compared to last year. Let's say that last year's level, the swimming pool was right up to the tippy top. This year, that level has been drained down a little bit. Not enormously, like in 2022, it was, that pool was almost emptied out. Because there was a 1.7 trillion drain in 2022. And I said when that, even before that happened, at the end of 2021, it's a helicopter, at the end of 2021, I said to you guys, 2022 is going to be a rough year because we're going to see the end of a lot of the COVID stimulus, and that was going to, withdraw a lot of that fiscal support. And that's exactly what happened. But then I said it will level out at a point, and I gave you that exact point, which was in October 2022. I said that's the bottom. It leveled out. The pool's gonna start filling back up again. I gave you the exact bottom. Anyway, moving on. So the level's down a little bit. It's not down a lot. It's not like 2022 when we had that huge drain. It's down a little bit. But I gave if this keeps happening, and by the way, you might be asking, well, Mike, why is it going down if spending is going up? Because here's the thing. The way Fiscal operates, I've in the past I've spoken about automatic stabilizers like Social Security, unemployment benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, this kind of stuff. When the economy's in a contraction, people start to lose their jobs. These other things kick in. Food stamps kick in. Unemployment benefits kick in. People go on disability, There's a bunch of things, and then that acts as a safety net. It's actually called a safety net. And those things expand. The spending on those things expand, and then it puts a floor under the economy. That's why they're called automatic stabilizers. But we actually get this same phenomenon in reverse when the economy expands. What do I mean? When the economy expands, let's say from very high fiscal, economy's growing, you get to the point where, more corporate profits, more personal earnings, more wages and salaries, more people working. The government tends to collect more and more taxes. Those tax collections grow with the expansion in the economy, and they start to grow to a point where they start to exceed the flows, the leading flows. And so you start to get a drain. Okay, it's like I was talking today, I said an analogy is like, let's say you're going downhill a mountain in your car and you're riding your brakes the whole time. You got your foot on the brakes. What happens? The brakes start to heat up after a while, and after a while when they get hot, they don't work. Okay, they lose their effectiveness. Same thing. So the economy is expanding. That draws out more and more tax deposits to the Treasury, and then you get to this inflection point. Here we go again with the inflection point where the amount of taxes being drained off is happening faster than those leading flows. This is what's happening now. So you're saying, Mike, how come we have a 7 trillion leading flow and the net flow is going down? Because taxes are just like blowing through the roof. What they really need to do now to sustain this, and this is going to be fine, now for a little while anyway, but this is the car going down the mountain with the driver with his foot on the brakes, and the brakes are heating up. And I think once we get to February 15th, which is a quarterly interest payment, that's the peak in this cycle for these leading fiscal flows. When I mean by cycle, I talk usually in quarterly cycles because you get these quarterly fiscal events like interest payments, tax drains, this kind of stuff. After February 15th, what happens? March 15th, quarterly corporate tax drain. April 15th, everybody knows that date. That's personal income taxes, right? And so that's the outlook. That's the outlook. So that's it for that. It's always fun to watch these monetarist zombies. All right? I just do these videos like this. There's nothing fancy in these videos. There's no maybe, I don't have a setup to do graphics and all this other stuff and fancy and music and whatever and edit cuts and this and that. I mean, you're lucky I'm even doing these things. I'm sorry to say, because it's like I stopped for a while, right? And then I came back. People were asking me to come back. But I'm sure they would be a lot better and a lot cooler if I put fancy stuff in there, but I'm not set up for that. I just talk. It's kind of like, just on a side note, I don't know if you have gotten the same impression as I have, but if you watch or listen to podcasts, if you're a podcast person and you like watch it, this is a totally different topic, okay? This has nothing to do with economics. I'll just let you know. If you like listening to podcasts or watching podcasts, whatever it is, Joe Rogan or who's ever out there, are you finding, as I am finding, that a lot of these podcasts, really like all of these podcasts, now kind of look exactly the same? In other words, they all have the same guests. They all have the same topics and questions. I mean, it's sort of like these and depending on what subject area, if it's general discussion like a Joe Rogan and something like that, Lex Friedman, they all have the same guests. If it's sports, they all have the same guests, okay? If it's geopolitical, it's like they all have the same. So it's like all these podcasts are kind of converging together where they all seem the same. And I was always, I got to tell you from experience, because I used to have a show on the New York Stock Exchange, and I used to have to book guests. And in the beginning, it's cool because you could book a lot of interesting guests and stuff, and there's you want people on there and it's fun. But after a while, it gets harder and harder to book good guests. And the list gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then you tend to repeat the same guests because you can't find anybody. So like this format, I find that this format of the interview format, I just think it's boring. Because after a while, it might be interesting in the beginning in a new podcast or a new guest, but after a while, it's all the same guests being recycled. I mean, I saw that on TV too. I was with Fox for 10 years. I mean, after a while, we had, it was all the same guests coming on. Just they rotate them. Same discussion, stuff like that. The producers would try to tweak it to something different. I think, and any of you who remember, I think the king of, and it predated podcasts, but I think the king was Rush Limbaugh. And many of you may remember, I mean, he died a few years ago, he had cancer, but he was the leading conservative radio talk show host. And by the way, I used to have a radio talk show from 2004 to 2009. So I know a little bit about this, and my format also was with guests, but I would do a lot of solo stuff, just talking, And when I did my podcast, maybe some of you remember my podcast, it's still up, but I think I'm going to take all those, all of them down, but they're still up now for listening. I did it solo. I didn't have any guests. But Rush Limbaugh was the leading radio talk show host in the nation. Conservative, liberal, didn't matter. He was the leading. He had something like, his audience was huge. It was something like 40 million people would tune into his show. He never had a guest. It was just him talking about different subjects and topics, and usually, of course, he was a conservative, so it was usually politics and conservative politics, always, right? But for somebody who can speak and who can articulate, and I'm not saying that's me, no, I'm just saying, like, I find that to be a much more interesting format than the same old interviews, rehashed, reheated over and over again. I don't know how you guys feel about that. And I don't know what made me go off onto this subject right now. But I mean, it looks to me like all these podcasts are just like exactly the same right now. Exactly the same. I mean, I like the format where it's one guy who's really, really smart and articulate and maybe funny or whatever, and doing it solo. That to me is cool. I learned stuff about that. Instead of watching the same guests and the same conversations over and over again. I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up. Anyway, that's it for today, folks. Don't forget, go to my website, pitbulleconomics.com. Sign up for a 30-day free trial of MMT Trader. See you tomorrow. Bye.